Hello, welcome to Drugs Unwrapped with me, Rob. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Juan Fernández Ochoa. Juan, how are we, buddy? You okay?
I'm good. It's a good day. It's even sunny in London, which is fantastic.
Awesome. You are a globetrotter. You're often found in different parts of the world. Where are you today?
I am in London at home. So I work the IDPC team, which is the team I work with. We all work remotely in different parts of the world. So there's some of us in Bangkok, some of us in Accra, Ghana, some of us in Amsterdam, and some of us in London.
Crikey, that is, yeah, a team that is pretty much all over the world, eh? All right. So Juan, are you able to, very briefly just share with everybody in terms of who you are, what you do, what your role is, and also you mentioned the International Drug Policy Consortium. It'd be cool actually in terms of obviously what they do as well.
Yeah, of course. So, as you said, Juan Fernández Ochoa, I'm Campaigns and Communications Officer at the International Drug Policy Consortium. This is a network of 196 currently organizations around the world in 76 countries, which come together to basically advance drug policies based on social justice and human rights. We believe that drug policies can be anchored in social justice and human rights, and currently they aren't. So we have different mandates as different member organizations, but we're all united in that. So I say this because some organizations might be focused on human rights, for example, or focused on women's rights, but they all understand the importance of ending the war on drugs, and that's where we come together as the secretariat of that network. So I work for the secretariat of that network, and our primary targets when it comes to advocacy are usually international and regional bodies, but also at the sort of local, national and regional level, we act as the central hub of the Support and Punish campaign, which I lead globally. Yes, we partner with local partners from all over the world, and we will talk a little bit about the extent of the campaign in a second, I'm sure, precisely to do that, to advance a future without the war on drugs.
How do like organizations get involved with that then? So you said you got like 190, was it you said?
Yeah, so we have an open sort of membership process whereby any organization that understands themselves as doing what our principles are, they can, as long as they're an non-governmental organization, not for profit, no corporations, etc., they can just apply, and we're united in these 5 core principles that are on our website. So there's also an invitation, I guess, if you do advocacy on drug policy reform and you sort of recognize your work in those 5 principles that are on our website, reach out, because we're always very open to new members.
So you mentioned you lead then on the Support Don't Punish, 26th of June, Global Day of Action. Are you able to briefly describe, Juan, all about the campaign and ultimately what it tries to achieve?
So, as I said, the Support and Punish campaign is a decentralized and grassroots-focused effort, global effort, international effort, to build sustainable alternatives to the war on drugs. And we believe those sustainable alternatives to the war on drugs necessarily have at their core the decriminalization of people who use drugs, and the decriminalization of all activities and behaviors associated with drug use, as well as access to harm reduction, which is, of course, life-saving as we know. So that is sort of also what unites us as the Support and Punish sort of, I'm going to call it network because why not? That's what we do basically. In terms of how that translates into practice, one of the biggest sort of expressions of the campaign is the Global Day of Action on the 26th of June. We selected the 26th of June because this, and I'm going to quote with a lot of disdain because this is an awful name, it's a UN International Day Against Illicit Drug Trafficking and Drug Abuse. Of course, this is a day that was conceived in the 1980s. So people who are listening to this may have an idea of what the 1980s represented in terms of the war on drugs. All over the world, we see a ramping up of criminalization. In the US, for example, numbers of incarcerated people, but also in the UK, will sort of skyrocket after, I think, from the 1970s, but there's definitely sort of like an inflection on the 1980s and then 1990s. And so historically, because of how that day was conceived and sort of where it comes from, which is that mentality of the war on drugs, historically governments would mark the day in incredibly sort of punitive and even gruesome ways. So just to give you an example, China, for example, until I think 6 years ago, would on the 26th of June announce death penalty sentences for people involved in drug supply.
Oh, wow.
And they also made it quite sort of quite a spectacle. Like there was sort of a stage and a public. It was really, for me, it represents to a certain extent the sort of one of the most extreme examples of that sort of way of marking the 26th of June. But even sort of that might be an extreme, but if you look around the world, usually that is or has been historically marked also by declarations from drug agencies or similar authorities, which will tell us how many people have been incarcerated, how many drugs have been seized, and these sort of procedural indicators that don't tell us much about the well-being of our communities or the safety of our communities. So the Global Day of Action is a counterpoint to that sort of war on drugs mentality and celebration of the 26th of June in this incredibly sort of, I would say a death-focused way. We want the opposite. We want a 26th of June that reminds us that we can take care of each other, that we can all stay well, that if we have access to what we need, everyone can have sort of thriving lives, regardless of their relationship with drug markets. So that is what the Global Day of Action does, sort of re-signify the 26th of June.
You talked about China then, and obviously that being an example in terms of how they previously marked the day. Just out of interest, have you found, whilst kind of running and overseeing this campaign, that you've seen backlash to it from countries that may take a similar approach in terms of their punitive measures? You talk about certain, obviously, countries that still have the death penalty for drugs in whether it's drug possession or drug supply or whatever. Have you seen backlash to the campaign?
Occasionally, local partners will organize a protest or a march, and that may attract police attention. And in the past sort of 5 years, which are the years during which I have been at the helm of the campaign, we've probably seen just 2 or 3 cases where there's crackdowns. And I think local partners are really clever in organizing these actions in ways that reduce that friction a little bit with sort of the powers that be. And and we can talk about it in a second, one of the means of engagement of the campaign is precisely to reach out to policymakers and try to have sort of dialogue and conversation about those, about that vision that we have and about that tension and how we sort of manage to address that tension. And I think we've mostly been successful at that. So luckily, we haven't seen sort of a major backlash. There was a time about 5 years ago when a group of organizations came up with Prevent, Don't Promote, but that didn't go places. I think, it is a testament to local partners' sort of savviness that there hasn't been much of a backlash, actually. And we also try to lead with messages that are, this is my sort of perspective. As I said, this is a decentralized campaign, and the real sort of stars of the campaign are local partners. There's been sort of more than 200 local partners all over the world in 126 countries. So it's a really huge campaign. But my own opinion and vision of this sort of movement is that ultimately the vision that we're proposing, which is about protecting life and recognizing the preciousness of life, connects with so many people, and it's hard to, like, the message is so universal and so positive and so constructive, that I think that helps reduce that kind of tension.
I think the message is so simple but so effective, isn't it? In terms of like actually what you want to get across, just literally support, don't punish. It kind of says that as it is on the tin, really, isn't it? You know, so there's that lack of confusion really in terms of what you're trying to get across. And 126 countries, that's impressive.
Yeah. So just to respond to that previously, in terms of like it does what it says on the tin. Absolutely. We, from the beginning, wanted a message that was like this, that was easy to read, that wasn't jargony, because ultimately, this is a vision, of course, that we advance in relation to the war on drugs. But again, my personal view is this is a vision also for society more generally. Like, we need more caring and supportive societies where we don't discard people and treat people as disposable, and rather sort of make sure that no one's left behind. So it is truly a universal message. And in terms of the evolution of the campaign, it's been fantastic to see that message speak to so many people. So when we first conceived the campaign, maybe I'll go to a certain extent into the history of the campaign. If we go back to 2011, IDPC, with some international HIV organizations, as well as community-led networks, both international, community-led networks, both international, so input was part of those conversations, and some national, came together as part of a grant by the Dutch government, which was called the Community Action for Harm Reduction, and came up with the idea of the campaign, actually. And the initial, inverted commas, target countries of that grant were just 5. So the Support Don't Punish campaign is born out of that grant, with a focus on HIV, with a focus on those 5 countries. And then the first Global Day of Action 2013 that we organized, we started sort of gauging people's appetite to mobilize under the campaign. And that Global Day of Action had activities in about 25 countries, about 49 cities of about 25 countries. So already very much exceeding our expectations. And we always talk about this particular case where it was the first Global Day of Action, and sort of we finished the Global Day of Action. It was wonderful. It exceeded our expectations. And then we received an email from, it was called the Hopers Foundation in Chennai, India. And they had sort of organized a Support Don't Punish activity that we weren't even aware of. And this was like we don't even fully know how they knew about the campaign, maybe the website. But that idea of the campaign speaking to people beyond the connection to us as sort of supporters or stewards of this initiative, I think represents what the campaign is after in terms of decentralization. We want people to own it. Sometimes I get people telling me, I didn't know there was even like people behind it. I thought it was something organic. And I'm like, great that you think it's something organic, because in many ways it is. We're just here sort of, I always tell local partners that we're here to support and resource what they already know how to do very well. And so that takes us to the last Global Day of Action, with activities in 296 cities of 98 countries.
Wow.
Which was a record, but that's sort of the numbers that we're seeing. And as I said, historically, there's been activities in 126 countries, and that's more than 2,100 activities. So yeah, it's really beautiful to see people all over the world sort of rise up for, a more welcoming, inclusive, non-stigmatizing society.
You'd argue that's how change actually happens, and it happens by the people, really, rather than the politicians, for example. Usually it's got to get the people behind it first, in most cases. But are you had 296 cities last year. Are you hoping this year you'll hit the 300? Are you now kind of playing that game every year, Juan?
I think at the back of my mind, I have that because I want to see it grow. I want to see it sort of grow also in numerical terms. But I also do my best not to sort of over fixate on numbers because, like, sometimes, for example, colleagues at Intercambios in Argentina or colleagues at Volna in Ukraine, they will organize little activities sort of all over the country, and that's really incredible and beautiful. But maybe one year you decide that you focus on, say, the president's office, or you focus on engaging with this particular authority. So that modifies the amount of cities where activities take place without sort of interrogating or questioning the substance. So it's a balance, right? Like, you want it to grow numerically, but you also sort of want to focus really on what is the impact that we're having. And on that, it's been really helpful. We recently finished a lifetime evaluation of the campaign, and the results are really, really beautiful, showing that sort of more than 70% of local partners feel that their engagement with the campaign, or consider that their engagement with the campaign, has contributed to changing policies and practices in regards to drugs. So that's very reassuring, and yeah, we'll see where it gets to this year. Sometimes I almost get more excited about new countries coming into sort of the roster, because that is a reminder for me that this cause that we sort of advance and are part of is growing, and it's reaching sort of places that previously were not sort of involved, and that makes me think this will bring solace and energy to the drug using community and other communities affected by the war on drugs in those places. So, for example, last year we had our first activity in Singapore, which is a place where drug policies are incredibly punitive. The death penalty for, I always say to colleagues, currently in the world we have oh my God, I lost the name of the state, Minnesota, where you can have at home, after cultivating 500 grams of cannabis. And in Singapore, for the same amount, for 500 grams, for the provision of 500 grams as supply, you could get the death penalty. So we live in a world of tremendous inequality in that sense. So whenever I see sort of the embers of change emerge in a new place, that gets me excited and hopeful.
The campaign itself then, Juan, so you obviously mentioned in terms of, like, previously there's been marches and stuff, and I think most people, including myself, when I think of the FDP campaign, primarily thinking about people on social media holding up the logo. What does it look like in practice then? So how do people get involved and share those messages?
Great question. So this is probably going to be a long response.
Go for it.
Because we envisage engagement in the campaign in terms of, maybe I'm very happy to be sort of interrogated or queried about this, but like, as a ladder of engagement, we want people to become ever more ambitious about what they can do to undermine the war on drugs and build sustainable alternatives to it. And that means that we always tell people the first step in engaging with the campaign is within you. Sort of be informed about what the war on drugs is, be informed about what criminalization does and what harm reduction can achieve for our communities, and share that with others. Do not ever, we live in most places, including the US, heavily stigmatize people who use drugs and anyone who is involved in drug markets or profiled to be involved in drug markets, because of course we cannot forget that, for example, in the UK, many people who are completely unrelated to drugs are stopped and searched. In particular, I'm thinking, Black people in this country are, depending on where you are, between 4 to 9 times more likely to be stopped and searched. So this war on drugs affects not only drug users and people who are involved in drug markets, but also community at large. And so yeah, the first sort of step in that ladder, I think, is interrupting those discourses and stigmatizing views that people have in relation to drugs and drug markets. And that starts with your family, with your friends. And of course, the campaign is a vehicle to have those conversations too, because it reminds people that this is a global apparatus, but there's also a global movement powered by people pushing back against this apparatus. So by doing that, you are part of this sort of global movement for change. So that's the first sort of step. The second or the next one that we consider is then more involved in the campaign. So where the colors of the campaign, we put all of our sort of merch and images and everything is sort of like free access online, and you can use it as you want to. We currently have a store on Redbubble, which is a platform for merch, and we put all of our designs there without sort of at cost. So we're not making profit from them because we want them to be as accessible as possible. And these images and the logo can be conversation starters. So that's sort of another step in this ladder. A following step in this, the next rung in this ladder would be joining the photo project. So it's a photo petition that has been running from the beginning of the campaign. It has more than 11,000 entries right now. And it just means it's a living photo petition. It just means that you are part of this sort of multitude of people that share this view. And another further rung would be the Global Day of Action, organizing activities for the Global Day of Action, marking the Global Day of Action as part of Support Unpunished Day, as we tend to call it, because of course that long name that I gave you, that the UN gave it, is so poor. So organizing activities is another rung, and we've recently, thanks to the Elton John AIDS Foundation, added another rung to that ladder, which is the Initiatives Program, which provides grants of, so this is something that I forgot to say, we also resource people who are organizing activities for the Global Day of Action. So we provide about between 100 and 140 grants that are very small. The average is $400, but that support people in organizing in this way. And then the Initiatives Program provides grants that are sort of medium-sized, so about $5,000 for work plans that last sort of 6 months. And so you can use the Initiatives Program to continue the momentum that you have built during the Global Day of Action. So that's sort of the means of engagement and action and impact of the campaign. And then that's in terms of sort of our ladder of engagement. But then what we nudge local partners to do, of course, everything that local partners do is decided by local partners. We're very aware that where we are positioned, that we're an organization in the global north based in London, it is not our business to tell people how they should be doing drug policy reform, but we can definitely provide advice and particularly point to experiences in other places. So people may have worries or concerns in relation to their engagement with the police. It might be that you're sort of in Recife, Brazil, and you're having this problem, and our colleagues in Nairobi are also facing the same problem and have also advanced ways to mitigate that. So what we do is mostly that, sort of encouraging people to think of tactics and strategies that are helpful for whatever realities they're facing. But ultimately, it is their decision, as I said. And what we nudge local partners to consider is what are some powerful levers of change. So we always tell people, one is public opinion, like think how you can engage with the media in order to precisely alter those and undermine those stigmatizing and punitive narratives. Consider also engaging with policymakers, which have so much power over our lives. So we also nudge people in that direction. And ultimately, also, we nudge people into considering how do our activities strengthen our community's capacity to make change. So Some of these activities may look like workshops on media engagement precisely. It might be that like the community is yet not sort of quite there in terms of reaching out to media. So we're very happy to resource also some of these capacity strengthening initiatives, especially in groups that are smaller or nascent. So that's sort of like means of engagement, ideas for tools and strategies on how the campaign works.
I know in terms of for us previous conferences, and we'll be doing it this year as well, actually, where we're going to be giving out the support don't punish logo to each delegate. So it's pretty well known for that to happen. And like I said, we've done it a few times as well. So we'll get everybody to hold it up and take a lovely picture of everybody in the room. Not forced against their will, of course. If they don't want to do it, then fair dues. We'll interrogate them afterwards. But no, but yeah, obviously everybody is on board. They're all in the room for the same thing, really, aren't they? So is there any examples, in terms of where support don't punish is actually being muted in terms of any particular like drug policy achievements?
Yeah, I would say that in most places, particularly in the global south, if there's a positive drug policy reform, people who have been involved in that have also been involved in support don't punish or know the campaign. So I see the campaign as definitely contributing to so many changes around the world. Of course, one day of activity will not change things, and we always remind people this is just a high point in your year-long campaigning and advocacy for change, of course. But participation in the campaign and sort of being part of this movement definitely emboldens people to continue doing this work, and it leads to achievements. And yeah, as I was saying, there was a lifetime evaluation of the campaign. So the campaign is now, this is going to be the 13th Global Day of Action, which is incredible. And this lifetime evaluation of the campaign asked so many of our local partners precisely that question, and more than 70% said yes. And some of the sort of more descriptive responses tell us how this happened. So for example, some of our colleagues in the Zimbabwe Civil Liberties Network have been engaging with the campaign for over 10 years, and they have built on this experience and this legacy, and through that constant and sustained engagement, as well as their sort of domestic and national work, they have managed to include harm reduction and non-punitive responses in Zimbabwe's drug master plan. So there's a drug policy reform process ongoing there, where most authorities are already on board with this switch, and we hope to see sort of that being reflected into legal changes imminently. In Lebanon, for example, our colleagues from SCOON have worked with parliamentarians precisely on the question of decriminalization, and managed to get a recommendation from the mental health commission of Parliament to make a recommendation to Parliament around decriminalization. So that reminds me also of the importance of finding who can be relays, powerful institutional relays to your message. And sometimes in this case, it was the mental health committee. And then how you leverage then that after it happens to continue convincing parliamentarians to move towards decrim. So there's now in Lebanon a coalition for decriminalization in Parliament. And that is to a huge extent thanks to SCOON and their engagement with the campaign. A similar situation is found in Colombia, where colleagues from Acción Técnica Social, ATS, have been engaging with the campaign again for, I think, 8-9 years. And that meant that they had built already networks of influence and of influence and knowledge that allowed them to, once there was a window of opportunity open, so currently in Colombia there's a very sort of pro-reform government, they were so ready to present or support a harm reduction bill, which is currently now going through Parliament, and we hope will succeed. So finally, harm reduction will be enshrined in law, and that will create sort of rights and guidelines in terms of what people who use drugs should have access to. So all of these examples remind us of, like, yeah, the importance of sustained engagement, building capacity so that when these windows of opportunity happen, you're ready to leverage them, or through your mobilization, you open those windows of opportunities, you catalyze those windows of opportunity. Because I would say that ATS's engagement with politicians that were already sort of amenable to change, through that engagement, they became not only amenable to change, but actual champions of harm reduction and decrim. Although in Colombia, there's been decrim since 1994, so harm reduction is the particular focus. But yeah, all of these examples, yeah, speak volumes of the power of local partners and people in making change. And yeah, we hope to see much more. And those are just 3 examples out of so many. I could talk for ages on this, Rob.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I guess kudos to you as well, Juan. You know, you kind of obviously said that the heroes really of it are those that get out and do it. But I think, you know, you provide the foundations and you provide, you know, the resources and obviously the incredible amount of knowledge and wisdom. I think you definitely have to take quite a bit of credit in terms of with that as well. In terms of just out of pure curiosity, are there like well-known people that, you know, people would have heard of that are very kind of supportive of the campaign?
100%. So the photo project, as I said, is open. Like, anyone can submit a photo, and we've been very lucky to occasionally get like photos of very sort of high reach personalities, and that includes from sort of people who are closer to our space. So deputy leaders, deputy director of UNAIDS. We also have some with former presidents and prime ministers who are now sort of reunited in the Global Commission for on Drug Policy. We, about 5 years ago, finally got Elton John's own photo, and he was so fantastic because he dressed in green for it, cool. Including a ring, a green ring. So every once in a while, we definitely share that. Richard Branson has also appeared in the photo project expressing support. So yeah, there's been, and that's a really good segue to another thing that we encourage our local partners to do, is to think, yeah, what I was saying earlier, actually, like, although I said at the time institutional relays, but in general, who would be the relays, powerful relays for your message? And yeah, local artists, some appreciated politicians on side, all of them definitely support our cause. And yeah, I could list quite a few. Like, there's ministerial level sort of ministers from Malaysia. The Minister of Law of Malaysia took his photo at a certain point. Some of the most sort of forward-thinking members of parliament in Indonesia also took a photo. So that is also very emboldening. Like, when you see sort of colleagues and peers and friends, but you also see people who, by their position in society, have power and take the time to relay this message. It's really emboldening.
Hey Juan, Taylor Swift's in Cardiff in a few weeks, so I'll try. Hey, Taylor Swift rules the world, man. Like,
throw that flyer at Taylor Swift and ask her to please, because that would be, yeah, of course. It's always really helpful to have those backings. And at the same time, not forgetting, again, I'm always sort of underscoring this, like, ultimately the power resides in us, and this is where we really want to sort of build strong foundations. We believe that for drug policy reform and the change that we want to see to be sustainable, we need to make sure that there's strong, well-resourced ecosystems of change, and that they are sort of responsive to community needs. And that's ultimately also what the ethos of the campaign is. It's not just sort of reaching change no matter what, but also change that actually responds to community needs. And that requires yeah, reclaiming power. People who use drugs, we've been incredibly sort of disempowered throughout history, and I hope that I know that the campaign also promotes that solidarity also between people who have experiences of oppression and harm related to the war on drugs. I definitely feel it that way, and I'm pretty sure many more feel it that way. And of course, allies. It's a campaign that definitely welcomes. We always say people resisting the war on drugs, people who have experiences of oppression and resisting the war on drugs, and allies, because we all have a role to play.
Before we wrap up, Juan, is there, obviously, you mentioned Colombia, and I know that you've gone across the world really with your work. Is there any particular country or area that you feel is quite exciting at the minute in terms of around drug policy reform?
This is a really hard question because there's so much happening, and I think that is something to communicate, and hopefully the people who are listening will be again emboldened by this. But I started getting involved in drug policy reform sort of professionally 10 years ago, and if I compare where we were at the time and where we are now, it's miles away in terms of progress. And the reason why I say this is because there's so much happening that is incredibly exciting and incredibly promising all over the world. Maybe like just to be annoying, I'll start with things that also give me a lot of hope in the UK. So some of the things that we've seen here that I'm very excited about relate to, for example, community-led initiatives of harm reduction. I'm thinking of HRT Cafe, which is a trans-led initiative for harm reduction related to the injection of hormones, for example, but also in relation to harm reduction and the use of drugs among trans people. And it's trans people leading care for each other, and that gets me very excited. And of course, I'm supporting the London Harm Reduction Hub, which is an initiative that Release is sort of incubating, and the idea is creating a very sort of low threshold, welcoming space for sex workers and drug users to come and if they need absolutely anything, like from materials of drug use to advice in relation to the law, housing, etc., to just to chat and have a sort of a nice warm drink and talk about drugs with other drug users and not. That space gets me very excited because it sort of, and the HRT initiative, because it sort of reclaims harm reduction away from the solely sort of medicalized understanding of harm reduction, which I definitely dread to a certain extent. And that's a nice segue to the international initiatives that I really appreciate, because one of them, the first that comes to mind, is safe supply initiatives in Canada, organized again by community. So there's the Drug User Liberation Front has, well, of course, listeners might know that Canada is facing a terrible drug death crisis, a catastrophe, a public health catastrophe, a death catastrophe. And part of the reason why it's taking place is because the supply of opioids has been pretty much completely dominated by fentanyl over the last few years. And what the Drug User Liberation Front does is that they will purchase drugs that from the darknet, test them to make sure what's in them. And these drugs are the drugs that used to be the drugs of choice of a lot of people, so like heroin or cocaine, and distribute them within this close-knit network of people who know each other and support each other in staying well in relation to their drug use. And that sort of communalization of drug supply, creating spaces where like people who are already using drugs and exposed to the vulnerabilities that entails, especially under the war on drugs and its criminalization, having that space for people to share drugs of predictable content as well as knowledge and care, I find really, really promising. And that takes me to the Philippines, where from 2016 until last year, there was a really sort of a state policy of murdering people associated with drug markets, people who use drugs as well as suppliers, by President Rodrigo Duterte. It led to the killings of approximately, although the numbers will never be known because of many reasons, but approximately 27,000 people, which is absolutely gut-wrenching. And in this, amidst this horror, two groups emerge, IDU Care and Street Law PH, that provide support for people who are using drugs in terms of harm reduction, HIV screening, know your rights training. People who are incarcerated are supported into becoming paralegals to support each other to navigate sort of the prison system in relation to drug offenses. So again, like these sort of community-led initiatives of care that resource people to support each other, I find really powerful, because I think, although I also want to see sort of policy reform and the resources of the state serving people who use drugs and everyone else, that will take a while. And in the meantime, it is important that we start building those sort of systems of care and support, and practicing what it would be to not thinking that other people's problems are sort of theirs, but recognizing that we are interdependent. We are united in our sort of human dignity. And yeah, we should be concerned about the health and well-being of people who surround us and our peers. So I think all of those initiatives sort of speak to that. And for me, that's harm reduction, actually. Accompanying each other in caring ways to navigate the risks that we sort of face in life, usually in relation to criminalization, stigma, and many other systems of oppression. So yeah, I'm very, very excited about those projects and the many more that are mushrooming everywhere. I haven't mentioned so many, but there are so many, and I think that's the encouraging part. There's quite a range of initiatives that are breaking ground, and I think setting the foundations for a world without the war on drugs.
Lastly, Juan, in terms of if there's just one person, just an individual, they're not kind of linked to any specific organization or anything like that, and they want to get involved in the SDP campaign, really easy for them. What's the easiest thing that one person could do?
So the first thing is go to www.supportunpunished.org. There's loads of information about the campaign there, resources, printable materials, digital materials, flyers, so much that you can use. And I think that is your sort of platform to whatever you may want to do. And if you look at the website, you're still confused, write to campaign@idpc.net. I'm always very happy. Like at the moment, it might be a bit hectic and it might take me a while to respond, but I'm always very happy to sort of respond and to any queries that people may have about the campaign.
Fab. And yeah, thank you for supporting us over the last few years as well.
Pleasure.
You've been incredible. Juan, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time out to speak to us. And yeah, good luck with everything. Hopefully I'll see you soon. And thank you again.
Thank you so much. And on the 26th of June, remember, use the hashtag #SupportUnpunished, start the conversation, and yeah, let's make this edifice of prohibition fall. Thank you so much, Rob.
If you have been affected by any of the issues discussed in today's podcast, please reach out. Barod have a free and confidential live web chat service that is available 7 days a week on our website at barod.cymru, where you can chat to a trained support worker. Alternatively, you can contact Wales's National Drug and Alcohol Helpline, Dan 24/7, either by calling 0808 808 2234 or text Dan to 81066.